Have you ever spent an entire week studying for a test, only to end up with a worse score than your friend who only crammed the night before? If that sounds familiar, the problem probably isn't that you aren't studying hard enough. You're just studying the wrong way. Most people believe that to get better results, you just need to study more. But here's the truth. Only about 20% of your study time produces nearly all of your results. The other 80% just leaves you tired, bored, and forgetting everything even faster. The interesting part? The students who learn the fastest aren't necessarily smarter than everyone else. They just know a few key principles that almost nobody ever teaches in school. And in the next few minutes, I'm going to show you those principles, so you can learn so efficiently it almost feels like you're cheating. Let's start with the first one, the 80-20th rule. Most of us have heard of this before. 20% of the population owns 80% of the world's wealth. 20% of the apps on your phone take up 80% of your usage time. 20% of the clothes in your closet are the ones you wear 80% of the time. This rule shows up in almost every area of life. And of course, it applies to your studying too. Just 20% of what you study determines about 80% of your exam results. So think back to your most recent test. How much time did you actually spend preparing for it? And how much material did you really study? Now think about it again. How much of everything you studied actually showed up on the test? I bet it was only a very small portion, probably less than 20%. Most of us study with this fear in the back of our minds. What if I don't study this and it shows up on the test? That fear is exactly the root of the problem. It's what makes you spend 80% of your study time on material you don't actually need. You need a new mindset to get new results. From now on, whenever you study, don't just ask yourself, what's going to be on the test? Start asking yourself another question. What's not going to be on the test? If you only use the first question, the amount of material you feel you need to study is almost endless. But when you use both questions together, the amount of material you actually need to study drops dramatically. That's what real focus looks like. If you apply the 80-20th rule correctly, 8 hours of focused studying can be just as effective as 40 hours of studying the way you do now. And of course, that leads to completely different results. At this point, many of you are probably wondering, so how do I know what will and won't be on the test? The answer is surprisingly simple. Look at past exams. The best way is to practice with previous year's exams. Next, answer the questions at the end of each chapter in your textbook. Those questions usually focus on the main ideas, so if you can answer them well, you've already mastered the core content. And finally, the simplest and most effective method is to constantly ask yourself the two questions I just shared. Just doing that alone will help you cut out a huge amount of unnecessary material. Alright, let's move on to the next method, active learning. Many scientific studies have shown that this is by far the most effective way to learn. Most students study passively. They simply take in information, listening to lectures, listening to audiobooks, rereading the textbook, or highlighting everything with different colors. It looks like they're working hard, but the results are actually very poor. Active learning is completely different. This method forces your brain to stay active, to think, analyze, and work. When you use active learning, your brain is basically at the gym. And just like your muscles, the more you train it, the stronger it becomes. Here are a few simple ways to put this into practice. Method number 1. Do practice problems. Instead of spending hours just studying the theory, focus on understanding the main ideas first. Then immediately start solving practice problems. This is where your brain really starts working. By solving problems, you learn how to actually apply what you've studied. You can understand the theory without being able to apply it. But if you can apply it, you definitely understand the theory. Method number 2. Active recall. When you want to remember something, don't just reread the material over and over again. Make your brain do the work. After reading a section, close the book and ask yourself, what did I just learn? Explain it out loud, or just think it through in your head. Then open the book and check what you got right and what you missed. Close the book again and try to recall the information once more. Repeat this process until you can remember everything without looking at your notes. When you use this method, your brain will feel uncomfortable. But that exact discomfort is what helps the information stick in your long-term memory. The next technique is spaced repetition. Once you've identified something truly important that you want to remember long-term, review it at specific time intervals, after 1 day, 3 days, 7 days, 14 days, and 30 days. At each of those intervals, spend just a few minutes reviewing what you've learned. If you only learn something once and never review it, your brain assumes it isn't important and eventually forgets it. That's why reviewing is so important. Research shows that those are the best times to review what you've learned. Next up is the Feynman Technique. Simply put, after learning something, stand up and pretend you're teaching it to someone else. You don't have to use the exact words from the book. Explain it in your own words. When you can explain an idea in your own words, that's when you truly understand it. Alright, let's move on to the next method, using a timer. There's a very famous principle called Parkinson's law that says, work expands to fill the time you give it. If you give yourself 3 hours to finish a task, it will probably take the full 3 hours. But if you limit that same task to just 30 minutes, you'll often finish it in 30 minutes. If you think you have the whole evening to study one subject, you'll work at a snail's pace. But if you set a timer and decide, I'm only going to study this for 30 minutes, your brain will kick into high gear. So before you start studying, break your study material into 30-minute blocks. In other words, you only have 30 minutes to finish each block of material. This creates urgency, helps you stay focused, and stops you from procrastinating or zoning out. Remember, a ship with a clear destination will always move faster than one that's just drifting aimlessly at sea. The next method is using AI. In today's world, not knowing how to use AI for studying is a huge disadvantage. With AI tools, it's like having a personal tutor available 24/7. In the past, if you couldn't solve a problem, you had to ask friends, teachers, or search through textbooks. Now you can get an answer and an explanation in just a few seconds. That saved time lets you learn much more efficiently. Plus, for every subject, there are countless ways to use AI to help you improve faster. So don't hesitate. Learn how to use these tools and take full advantage of them. The next technique is keeping a mistake journal. This is one of the biggest differences between average students and the top 1%. Imagine you have a test tomorrow and only 2 hours left to study. What would you do? Most students try to review as much material as possible, including things they already know pretty well. It makes them feel safer and more confident, but it doesn't help them improve much. Top students do something different. They have a special notebook where they write down every mistake they've ever made. And when they only have 2 hours left, they spend that valuable time reviewing their mistake journal. Reviewing things you already understand helps you maintain knowledge, but it doesn't help you improve. Learning from your mistakes so you don't repeat them is what truly helps you improve. So, keep a mistake journal, write down your mistakes and learn from them. This advice doesn't just apply to studying, it works in life too. The final method is taking care of your health and protecting your focus. Make sure you get at least 8 hours of sleep every night. Eat nutritious food, drink plenty of water, and exercise every day. Very few students realize that lack of sleep destroys your memory, focus, and your brain's ability to recover. When you're sleep deprived, your brain is like someone who's mildly drunk. And no one becomes a genius while drunk. Finally, protect your focus. Create a dedicated study environment that helps you concentrate. And most importantly, stay away from short-form videos, especially TikTok. That app doesn't just steal your time. It can damage your attention span, your ability to think deeply, and your motivation to study. If you scroll TikTok for 30 minutes and then try to go back to studying, you'll feel the difference immediately. And one last thing. If you only remember one thing from this video, let it be this. Studying a lot doesn't mean you'll do well. Studying smarter is what gets results. Each week, add one new method from this video to your study routine. After a few months, you'll be shocked at how much better you've become at learning. Alright, That's it for today's video. I'll see you in the next one. Have an awesome day.